Much like the Canada General Service Medal we saw in the last episode, the Northwest Canada Medal was issued for service entirely within Canada and mainly to members of the Canadian militia. But, paradoxically, while the medal for the Fenian raids of 1866 was not issued until after 1899, this medal was authorized almost immediately after the events for which it was awarded. It will be remembered that Louis Riel, one of the leading members of the Métis Provisional Government established in 1890 in the fledgling province of Manitoba, was forced into exile in the United States after being denied amnesty for the political murder of Thomas Scott. While Riel did return to Canada sporadically, usually in disguise and under an alias, he remained in the United States for the next 10 years, seemingly settling down, getting married, and fathering 2 children. Meanwhile, back in Canada, following the Red River Resistance, the Métis travelled west and settled in the Saskatchewan Valley, but the rapid expansion of the British westward led them once again into conflict with the government. At a joint Métis settlers meeting held on the 24th of March 1884, it was resolved to ask Louis Riel to return to Canada to represent them in their negotiations with the government. Riel, not one to miss an opportunity, was easily persuaded, and unwisely returned north, where he gave a series of speeches in which he advocated moderation and a reasoned approach. In an echo of his time in Manitoba, he was instrumental in setting up a provisional government of Saskatchewan, centred around the town of Batoche. At the same time as these events unfolded, a separate but similar campaign was started with the indigenous Cree people, who were also in dispute with the Canadian government. By the 1880s, the rapid collapse of the buffalo herd was causing near starvation among the First Nations. This, combined with the usual failure of government to live up to its treaty obligations with the indigenous people, led them to embark on a diplomatic campaign to renegotiate the terms of the treaties, led by their chief, Big Bear. With the government responses to both delegations being vague at best, rebellion broke out into violence on March 26, 1885, when 150 to 200 Métis and Aboriginal warriors, under the command of Gabriel Dumont, defeated a combined group of 90 Prince Albert volunteers and Northwest Mounted Police at the Battle of Duck Lake, just outside Batoche. 4 days later, a raiding party of Cree people, short of food due to the declining bison population, approached Battleford. The inhabitants fled to the nearby Northwest Mounted Police post at Fort Battleford. The Cree then took food and supplies from the empty houses and stores. On April 2nd, at Frog Lake, a Cree raiding party, led by Cree war chief Wandering Spirit, attacked the small town. They gathered all the white settlers in the area into the local church, killed Thomas Quinn, the town's Indian agent, then attacked the settlers, killing 8 more. Following Duck Lake, the government commenced the mobilization of some of Canada's ill-equipped part-time militia units, as well as the units of cavalry, artillery and infantry regulars that made up the tiny, almost non-existent, Canadian Regular Army. By March 30, after hasty mobilization, 2 trains containing the 10th Royal Grenadiers and the Queen's Own Rifles militia battalions were ready to leave Toronto. On April 24, 1885, at Fish Creek, Saskatchewan, 200 Métis achieved a remarkable victory over a superior government force numbering 900 soldiers, who were sent to quell the rebellion. And on May 2nd, the Cree War Chief Fine Day successfully held off Lieutenant Colonel William Otter at the Battle of Cut Knife near Battleford. Despite the early victories, the rebellion was doomed to fail after the overwhelming government response, led by Major General Frederick Middleton, the commander of the Canadian militia, attacked Batoche, stronghold and provisional capital of the Métis, on May 9, 1885. The greatly outnumbered Métis ran out of ammunition after 3 days of battle and siege. The Métis resorted to firing small rocks from their guns until they were killed or dispersed when Middleton's soldiers advanced in strength and overran their defences. Riel surrendered on May 15th. The defeat of the Métis and Riel's capture led to the collapse of the provisional government. The Cree fought a small battle at Frenchman's Butte against a force of militia, including Northwest Mounted Police, at the end of May, and the last armed engagement of the rebellion was at the Battle of Loon Lake, when, on June the 3rd, a small detachment of Northwest Mounted Police, under the command of Major Sam Steele, caught up with Big Bear's force, which was moving northward after their victory at Frenchman's Butte. Big Bear's fighters were almost out of ammunition and fled after a short exchange of fire and the release of some hostages. Demoralized, defenseless, and with no hope of relief after the surrender of Riel's forces at Batoche, most of Big Bear's fighters surrendered over the next few weeks. The government at last addressed the critical food shortage of the Cree by sending food and other supplies. Big Bear was sentenced to prison. 8 others were hanged in the largest massed hanging in Canadian history. Following his surrender, the trial of Louis Riel started on July 28, 1885. Charged with 6 counts of treason, on July 31st, after only 1 hour and 20 minutes of deliberation, the jury found him guilty, but recommended mercy. Nevertheless, Judge Richardson sentenced him to death. The execution took place on November the 16th and sparked national controversy between English and French Canada. On the 18th of September 1885, the Canadian government, after consultation with the British Secretary of State for the Colonies, sanctioned a medal for all those who took part in the suppression of the Northwest Rebellion. No British regiments were present, so by far the majority of the medals were issued to Canadians. However, there were 16 British officers on staff at the time, and they were issued with the award. The obverse of the Northwest Canada Medal, which is 36 millimeters in diameter, was designed by Leonard Wyon and bears an image of Queen Victoria, facing left and wearing a crown and a veil. Around the edge is a Latin inscription that translates to Victoria, Queen and Empress. The reverse, designed by Thomas Brock, has the inscription Northwest Canada, surrounded by a wreath of maple leaves, and the date 1885 in the centre. The medal disc is hung from its ribbon by a straight silver bar suspender, and the ribbon, which is 32 millimeters wide, is bluish-grey, with crimson stripes running vertically down near each edge. One clasp was authorised for the Northwest Canada Medal, that for Saskatchewan, issued to those present at any one of the 3 main encounters during the rebellion. Approximately 1,760 of these were awarded. The medals were issued unnamed, and a variety of naming styles can be found as the recipients had their names added locally. In total, 5,650 medals were eventually issued. The medal shown here was awarded to Charles Gayfer, who served with the 95th Manitoba Grenadiers. Thank you for watching, and join me again next time when we return to South Africa to examine a medal for a war made famous in the cinema.